What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we are going over the starts and sits at the tight end position. Unlike in the running back and wide receiver video, we don't really need to go into all the matchups. We're usually making a decision on the players that are ranked between TE8 through TE16, because the guys that you drafted earlier, even in bad matchups, you're likely going to start them. I will, however, go through some of the early guys and let you know how I do feel overall about their matchup, but we'll focus mostly on the guys that are on the cusp of that. Before we do get into the video though, stat of the day. Yesterday's stat of the day was which running back led the league in forced evaded tackles per touch, as well as elusiveness rating. The correct answer was Josh Jacobs. Congratulations to Goddard, you got this one right. As for today's stat of the day, in 2019, Travis Kelce led the league at the tight end position in target percentage inside the 10. Which tight end with at least 5 10-zone targets ranked second right behind him? Leave your answer in the comments section down below. We'll be happy to let you know who wins in tomorrow's video. Also, guys, if you're in a pinch and not sure who to start between two players ranked very closely, consider signing up for our in-season content. All members have access to our trade targets, all of the waiver information when it comes to how much fab we would spend on them, which players are droppable. The weekly rankings tell you exactly which player we would start over the other, so combine our takes with the rankings so you'll know exactly which player we would start, so you can feel confident in your lineup heading into the week. If that interests you, go to our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com, link as always in the description box below. Let's start the video by glossing over the top guys. I'm going to start with George Kittle. No secret here, we're obviously starting him, but just to set your expectations, you can expect him to possibly have one of his best games of the season against Arizona this week. There are a few factors that could lead him to have an even better game than he typically would against Arizona. Last season, they allowed the most fantasy points to the position, which is a really positive sign. Even though it's really difficult to predict defensive performance season over season, we know that they're not going to be vastly improved. George Kittle is the type of player to perform against some of the best defenses, so to get a matchup like Arizona in week 1, he is going to be getting off to a hot start. When it comes to these San Francisco receivers altogether, they're extremely depleted. Heading into this game, both Brandon Ayuk as well as Deebo Samuel, they're listed as questionable, so when it comes to the aerial attack, they're going to heavily rely on George Kittle. Combine that with having one of the best matchups on the entire week, and you have a player with massive upside. That's why we have him ranked as the #1 overall tight end. We wouldn't even be surprised if he has 100 plus yards, multi-touchdowns. That's the type of upside he brings to the table. Moving over to Zach Ertz, we can see some similarities between him and Kittle. Although Ertz doesn't have a super positive matchup like George Kittle does, the Eagles' weapons are also very depleted from the receiver position. You have Jalen Reagor listed as doubtful. Alshon Jeffrey, we're not sure if he's even going to play or if he does, in what capacity. So the main weapons in the passing attack are going to be Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert, as well as Deshaun Jackson. Ertz the clear favorite to lead when it comes to a target standpoint, so he should see plenty of volume, possibly double-digit targets, and a solid chance to score as well. Another tight end with a solid chance to score is Mark Andrews. He scored 3 times on Cleveland last season, 1 in their first game, 2 in their second game, and heading into this matchup, this game has one of the highest point totals of the entire week. The Baltimore Ravens are 10-point favorites, so they are expecting most of the offensive production to come from Baltimore. So Mark Andrews, he definitely has a ton of upside and a safe floor as well. Now, if it does get into the fourth quarter and the Baltimore Ravens are up 2+ touchdowns, he may not see the same time on the field, so we're going to hope that he scores early so we don't have to rely on him scoring late if the game is possibly out of hand. As for Darren Waller, he's heading into this game against one of the worst defenses in the entire league. This matchup does come in with a 46.5 point over-under, and with a 1-point spread, this does have some sneaky potential to be somewhat of a shootout. Not because these offenses are going to be operating very smoothly, but just because the defenses for each team are very poor. Darren Waller being the primary chain mover between the 20s, he brings in a solid amount of upside in PPR leagues, but although this is a solid matchup, we can't expect him to have immense upside because he hasn't had heavy involvement in the red zone. 11 red zone targets in all of 2019. He converted that into 3 receiving touchdowns. So while he will have a safe floor, we may not be able to expect the same amount of upside as some of those top tier tight ends. So with the auto starts out of the way, let's talk about some players I really like this upcoming week. I'm going to start with Hayden Hurst of the Atlanta Falcons. Starting Hayden Hurst undeniably comes with a fair amount of risk. We're not sure how well he will perform in this matchup, not because of ability or opportunity, but mostly because of chemistry. We haven't seen him perform for fantasy with other quarterbacks. It's also his first year on a new offense, which could also add some risk. But in week 1, he finds himself in a very positive matchup loaded with opportunity, and he has the ability to perform very well. The Seattle Seahawks in 2019 allowed the 2nd to the 4th most fantasy points to the position, depending on your scoring format. So for Hayden Hurst, this is a very beatable matchup. Not only that though, it has one of the highest projected totals of the entire week. Russell Wilson and the Seahawks should have absolutely no problem scoring against the Falcons. So into the 3rd, in the 4th quarter, we should still expect plenty of passing volume. So for Hayden Hurst, as long as the chemistry between him and Matt Ryan is there, then he undoubtedly can perform as a top 5 tight end this week. We do have Hayden Hurst ranked ahead of players like Evan Engram, Hunter Henry, 2 very talented tight ends, but they may not have the best matchup this week. And with each of those players, there are a certain amount of question marks as well. Neither one of those players is much safer than him, and we could argue that he has the most upside out of all 3 of those players. Another player that we really like in this range is Tyler Higbee. Higbee and the Rams face Dallas in what's the 2nd highest projected total of the entire week. One thing that we know about the Dallas Cowboys offense is that we're expecting them to be one of the most potent offenses in the entire league, and starting off against the LA Rams, they should put up a ton of points. This should force the LA Rams into a situation in which they should be very pass friendly, and in games with high projected totals, we're expecting players besides the top options that are consistently putting up points each and every week to produce fairly well. Tyler Higbee, he's one of those players. Not only that, he did already burn Dallas. In week 15, he posted a game with 14 targets, converted that into 12 receptions, 111 yards. He did not score, but still, in half PPR leagues, that is a 17-point game. Since the Rams already know that Tyler Higbee can succeed in this matchup against this defense, they could look to use him as an outlet once again this week. And the Dallas Cowboys defense is a defense that allowed the 3rd most receiving yards to the position just a season ago. With the ambiguity that's coming from the backfield, not knowing exactly who will play, who will be the starter, and what the splits will look like, it's very possible the Rams could lean heavier on the passing attack. Tyler Higbee once again should be in line for a very solid performance. So if you drafted him and you're considering starting one of the later round guys you drafted over him, don't fear this defense. Yes, they were good last season, but not against the tight end. He's in a position where the Rams will likely lean on him, and those are the types of matchups you're going to want to get him in your lineup. Let's move over to Noah Fant of the Denver Broncos. If you drafted Noah Fant, he could possibly be your 2nd option. So if you do have one of those tight ends that are ranked ahead of him, even though he's in a good matchup, don't try to force him into your lineup because there are a significant amount of question marks attached to Noah Fant this week, but we still have him ranked inside the top 12. There's plenty of upside for him in this game. So for those of you that did draft him as your TE1, put him in your lineup and feel pretty good about it. In 2019, the Tennessee Titans allowed the 7th most receiving yards to the position, the 3rd most touchdowns as well, and although they did add some pieces to this defense, none should really impact the overall potential of Noah Fant this week. The defense of the Broncos, they did lose Von Miller, which is a major impact for the overall efficiency of the defense. The Broncos, while typically in contention to keep teams within 1 score, if the Titans get a hot start, this could inflate the overall passing volume for the remainder of the game. That alone would be positive enough for us to want to force him into the lineup over some other mediocre options. But there has been news that has come out. Courtland Sutton suffered an AC joint sprain. Even if Courtland Sutton does play, it's likely that his snaps will decrease. This overall would mean that Noah Fant and his snaps should increase, and the potential for targets and opportunity is going to increase as well. Keep in mind though, this game does have one of the lowest projected totals of the entire week. We can't expect all that much from Noah Fant, but with most tight ends lines in this range being touchdown or bust, Noah Fant does have a good opportunity to hit the high end of his range of outcomes. Before we do get into the really late guys, let's talk about 4 players who are going to make it into most people's lineup. We'll start with Evan Engram of the New York Giants. If you own him, you're likely going to start him even though this isn't an ideal matchup. It's against Pittsburgh this week. Pittsburgh has been one of the best defenses in the league in 2019 and has the opportunity to be even better this upcoming season. A positive offense is going to mean less time overall on the field for the defense. They're not going to be as tired. They will have the ability to perform more efficiently. So the major concern that I really have with Evan Engram isn't on his ability, it's going to be on Daniel Jones and how he is going to be able to deal with this defense. On a positive note for Engram though, they should be trailing for most of this game, which is going to be positive for the passing game script. So the potential for garbage time production, it's going to be there. I'm not thrilled about the matchup or his potential upside, but regardless of that, I still expect him to perform as a top 12 tight end this week. I think he will have better games in other matchups, but you gotta start him. You invested the draft capital into him. Don't avoid Engram because of this matchup. As for Hunter Henry, we sort of have the opposite. We know he is very talented. This is also a pretty solid matchup, and there's no Mike Williams, so that means the potential for more targets is also there. The only downside, of course, is the unknown with the target splits. We know Phillip Rivers heavily targeted the tight end position. Tyrod Taylor never really proved that throughout his career, so we can't guarantee Hunter Henry will be all that involved. With that being the case though, if you drafted him, you are likely a Hunter Henry believer. You think he came in at a good value. I personally did not draft him in any leagues. I would like to have taken a wait and see approach with him. But if you drafted Hunter Henry and invested solid draft capital into him, you're not going to be drafting another top tight end that's ranked inside the top 12 anyways. So you're going to put him in. What type of results we could expect is a mixed bag. He's going to have to score a touchdown in order to produce, and that's going to fall on the shoulders of Tyrod Taylor. We do have him ranked inside the top 12, but it wouldn't surprise us that if he doesn't score, there is the potential that he hurts your lineup. Moving over to Rob Gronkowski. This is clearly a player who has immense upside. He has chemistry with Tom Brady, so coming into week 1, the actual connection he has with the quarterback should be better with him than it is for any other receiver on this team. The risk with Gronk is not going to be his chemistry with Brady, it's going to be with his overall snap percentage. There have been mixed reports on how much he will actually play in each game. Most of the reports are on the low end, so once again we have a player who's going to be touchdown or bust. However, when we're talking about players that are touchdown or bust, you want to get players in games that have the potential to shoot out, games with high over-unders, and that's exactly what we have in this contest. This game has a ton of shootout potential. Tampa Bay is actually an underdog, so I would say Gronk has a pretty solid chance to score. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as they get deeper into the season, Tom Brady will feel more comfortable with the other receivers, shrinking the overall advantage for Gronk, and with the New Orleans Saints being one of the better offenses in the entire league, it's going to put the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a situation in which they have to score. All of those signs are really good for Rob Gronkowski, so if you drafted him, get him in. We have him ranked inside the top 12. Just know that he does have a very low floor. Another low floor tight end is going to be Jared Cook. Once again, this is a situation where it's touchdown or bust, but when looking for players that do need a touchdown in order to produce, you want to find those positive matchups, the games with the high totals, against teams that are not great against the tight end position, and both of those factors reign true in this matchup. This makes Cook a solid start this week, not one that we're higher than consensus or lower than consensus, but if there were a game for Jared Cook to bring back some of that magic he had in 2019, this is certainly one that could do that. So at this point, we've ran through all of the top 12 tight ends. Let's get into some of those streaming options. To start, we have Mike Gesicki. Not the greatest matchup against New England, but he definitely has some upside. This is a player who was near the top of the league when it comes to air yards, and with Ryan Fitzpatrick lined up to be the starter, it's not going to be impossible for Mike Gesicki to have a good game. In 2019, although the New England Patriots were a very strong defense, when it came to guarding the tight end position, they were only middle of the pack. So when it comes to the actual performance of Mike Gesicki, it's all going to come down to variance. Can he have a good game? Yes. The more likely scenario is a bust, of course, but considering that the Miami Dolphins are likely to be trailing early and often, this does promote a positive situation for the passing attack, so it's undeniable that the opportunities will be there. The same is true for TJ Hockenson. Not a great matchup, but also not a terrible one. The projected total in this game is not very high, so there aren't going to be a ton of opportunities to score. And for the tight end position, which is usually reliant on a touchdown in order to be start worthy, TJ Hockenson may be in line for an uphill battle. We have him ranked as the tight end 15, so if you do have better options, try to get them in over Hockenson, but it's very likely that his better games may come on the back of some injuries to some of the offensive pieces. His potential to produce will be much higher in better matchups, so if you can find a better option, try to get them in over Hockenson. Another tight end I'm not thrilled about this week is Jonnu Smith. While I am very high on him from a season-long perspective, this may not be the matchup. The reason for that is, like I said, with Noah Fant, I do expect the Titans to have a lead. We know that in leads, they rely heavily on Derrick Henry, which will ultimately limit the overall opportunities for the receivers in this matchup, Jonnu Smith being one of those. If you drafted him, though, he was coming off the board at around the TE15 through TE20, so you probably have better options anyway. So for you Jonnu Smith owners, I am a Jonnu Smith owner as well. I am going to be looking into other options this week. The same is going to hold true for Chris Herndon. This game has the lowest projected total of the entire week. The Bills defense, it is legit, and you don't want to be starting receivers on this team against this defense, especially when you consider that Chris Herndon was dealing with injuries, missed a few practices, so we can't guarantee that he's coming into this matchup the healthiest that he's been. We also can't guarantee that his chemistry with Sam Darnold is there, and these are two risk factors that inflate the risk of Chris Herndon, and I know he's a hot player, one that a lot of people want to fit in their lineups, but take a wait and see approach with him. We do expect him to have much better games in the future, but the upside for him, it really isn't there in this matchup. A couple of sleepers that I do like, for one, is Jack Doyle of the Indianapolis Colts. Word is that Trey Burton may not be available for the first 2 weeks at least, which means that the snaps for Jack Doyle should be at their highest point. Phillip Rivers is also a quarterback who heavily targets the tight end position, and with the limited offseason, no preseason games, we have seen quarterbacks that are making adjustments rely on the tight end position. It's one of the major trends that we see with rookie quarterbacks that are adjusting to new offenses. So for Phillip Rivers, somebody who has a history of targeting that position, these are all very positive signs for Jack Doyle. I don't think he has the upside to finish top 5 in his range of outcomes, but he does have a safe floor. So for those of you in a 14-team league, 16-team league, Jack Doyle is a player who may be able to get it done. The last sleeper I'll mention is Blake Jarwin. Once again, this is a player who, if you drafted him, you likely have better options, so don't try to get too cute with it. But as I mentioned in the Tyler Higbee breakdown, this is a matchup that has one of the highest projected totals of the entire week. Amari Cooper, he is also banged up, so there is a likely chance that Blake Jarwin has a good game. Am I starting him over a proven player? Absolutely not. I would rather take a wait and see approach with him as well, but for those of you desperate out there, you could certainly do worse than Blake Jarwin. But guys, that's gonna do it for this video. We really hoped you enjoyed. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.